So let me stop for a minute and see if there are any questions or reactions. So the question is, where's the line around between you should be stronger and not so effective and you shouldn't be exposed to this? I don't have a clue where the line is. I do know that I have worked with people, as have you, who've been subjected to horrible stuff. Just talk about after a critical incident. You have some people who have seen people die and be shot and who have been exposed to terrible stuff, and they walk away going, you know, they're affected, but they're dealing with it, and other people just crumble. So it's really somewhere in there. So if somebody is being subjected to really difficult, demeaning behavior, and there's a threat of being fired, and they're worried about their family, this is a big deal. This is not something that you just walk away from. On the other hand, there is Viktor Frankl's rules about how do you survive a concentration camp. And so, quite frankly, without making a judgment about where the line is, if I'm working with somebody who's been a target, then I want to work with them on what can they do to not take it personally, and what can they do to protect themselves. And if I'm working on the other end, I'm acknowledging, yeah, we got a politically correct environment, but by the way, the other piece of this, now that I'm talking about this, is the reason it's called The Least You Can Do is that, and this is the title of my forthcoming book, which I now have the third goal for getting that published. The guy who's working on it with me tells me February. It's supposed to be December, and before that it was going to be September. So I thought this was going to be done by now. But it's really written to the executive, not to the coaches. And the idea is, yes, I agree with you, we live in a politically correct society, and because I respect you so much and I respect your warrior personality, I'm going to tell you the least that you can do to not get in trouble. By the way, if you do these things, it will make you more authentic, it will make you more powerful and effective, and therefore you will do it because it's the least you can do, because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, so the question was, if he had said he didn't believe in a higher power, what would the approach be? That was just a number of things we were talking about. It wasn't like, I'm going to ask you the big question now. And so I would have just gone around, looking for other things. At that point, I didn't have the exposure to the Navy SEALs. So my experience has been, in the last year and a half since I've had that exposure, that they react real well to the idea of, I don't think you're such a good warrior. You need to improve your warriorship. By the way, one last thing, Laura Crawshaw in her book talks about, and I think most of you would do this anyway, and I was doing it, but she really articulated it nicely, that she always interviews 15 to 20 people who have been targets of this person's behavior, and puts that in front of the person, puts the summary of that in front of the person. And in her experience, almost all of them are totally shocked at the impact that they are having. And so that's another way of going for intrinsic motivation. And it uncovers that they really don't want to be that. Yes. So it's really, what must you do so that you can live with yourself? And typically, for most of us, we have some blind spots and we rationalize our behavior. And even though we have some core values or core purposes, it's not unusual for us to skirt around them. My experience is that a lot of these executives are fairly out of touch with the fact that they're self-esteem and sense of well-being is attached to what we were discussing. So that's number one. And number two, they really don't know what they stand for. And most people don't. I don't know about you all. I would say the biggest difference between executive coaching and EAP/therapy counseling is that in executive coaching, you go after core purpose. And in therapy, we go after, and counseling, we go after how is your, understanding how your brain is wired and why you are reacting the way you're reacting so you can change that. And even in the executive coaching field, there are a lot of executive coaching companies that come out of the psychological model where they give a bunch of assessments and they help you understand yourself better. And then there are the coaching that comes out of more of the life coaching field. And I want to be clear, I am not supporting the life coaching field in this case. But what in the life coaching field, there is this piece about if you don't know who you are and what your core purpose is, you're not living a life that's motivated. And going after core purpose is a very different process. So typically involves asking people, when have you felt in the zone? When did you feel whole? And looking at those situations in their life and coming out with, well, it sounds like whenever you are serving and on a team, that's where, that's where you are really in the zone and that's what you want to do. So you want to serve and et cetera. I don't know what it is exactly, but I have spent, I think I may have seen 2 females among the 150 people who were referred for abrasiveness. And the literature that I have read is that female abrasives have a lot of the same characteristics, but they're different. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it goes back to the conversation we were having before about what's the line between you take responsibility for yourself and your career versus feel bad, and people who have that kind of a mentality, which is I can take care of myself, and I will, tend to be less damaged. So. Maybe the conversation with her is that it's clear that, number one, that you don't think this is happening, and it may be that you're not intrinsically motivated to change it, but minimally you have to think it's happening. And one of the things you could do is request that I interview people so I can give you that feedback. But if we can't, this is the 4th time we've had this conversation, if we can't get any further than this, I think I'm going to recuse myself from coaching you and let your boss know that he should evaluate you based on whether or not you make the changes your boss wants, not whether or not I decide to stay with you. Yeah, I think that's a legitimate argument in terms of why they're so frustrated and how the environment that they're working in tolerates performance that you would never have tolerated in the Navy SEALs. That's true. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a right to be abusive and disrespectful to people, number one. And number two, let's forget about right to be abusive and disrespectful to people. Do you want to be more effective? Because what you are doing is causing negative reactions. And if what you're telling me is they don't deserve it and you're going to continue to do this, then there's no point in us working together. There has to be some real reason why you would do this even if you weren't getting this pressure. Otherwise, there's no point in working with me. Periodically referring people for therapy, but not that often. I like to refer people to, I'm qualified to begin people with mindfulness and with compassion cultivation, but I am not qualified to take them much further. So I introduce them to it, and then I tend to refer them either to psychologists, social workers, et cetera, who are trained in that and will work through that, or you know, I studied Tai Chi for 8 years in San Diego at the Taoist Sanctuary, and I've referred several people to the guy who was my master, if you will, at the Taoist Sanctuary. So those tend to be the ones for me, yeah. So yeah, good comment. In a properly funded executive coaching for an abrasive executive, there should be enough space in there, enough essentially money in there, for you to be able to interview people several times and stay in connection and give the executive feedback. Marshall Goldsmith's process is that you have the executive bring their stakeholders in the room, and you sit there with them as the coach, and their job is to say, thank you for the feedback. I realize that I have caused a lot of damage. I look for your forgiveness. This is my goal. Do you think I'm working on the right thing? And what behavior do you want to see from me in the future? And also, the other piece that I use is feed forward, which is also a Marshall Goldsmith term. Feedback is, what did I do in the past that was good or bad? Feed forward is, I have a goal, what do you want to see from me so that you'll rate me high on this goal? So if they come out with a goal that they want to have, for instance, respectful, collaborative relationships with everybody in the workplace might be one of the goals. Then they'll go out and they'll meet with all of their stakeholders, and they have to say, this is my goal, do you think I'm working on the right thing? And if they get a no, you should be working on this, they have to take notes. They're not allowed to argue. So they have to do that whole set. If the person says, yes, you are working on the right thing, then they say, what do you want to see from me? What behavior do you want to see from me in the next 3 to 6 months so that you'll say that I'm making progress? And they have to take down all those behaviors. They don't have to do them. They have to take them down, and they can't argue. They can ask for clarification, but they can't argue. And then they continue to do that. And if they're not willing to do that, by the way, that's one of the things that lets me know that I'm not going to be effective. They have to be willing to go around, apologize, and then I'm going to follow up and find out whether they did go around and apologize. So does that help? Yeah. Let me say that one piece I didn't mention is, as you're meeting with the boss around the behavior of this person, it is a very good thing to also ask, are there other people doing it? Because a lot of times it's a cultural issue, and they're reacting to the person who's at the top, you know, who's the most obvious. And you know, I think you'll hear that from the people that you are interviewing. You'll hear that it's racial, you'll hear that it's gender. I actually haven't gotten a whole lot of that, but obviously you're going to hear it. And then they need to get that feedback, and in some cases the company needs to get that feedback and know that they need to do something. However, if you've done your work up front with interviewing the boss and human resources, you've asked, you know, is this happening with other people? Are you getting complaints of discrimination? So it's part of what you're asking about, so that you find out whether or not this is just one strange person or you've got a culture that's allowing this. Yeah.
All right, wasn't it good?
Thank you.